Okay. Do you feel that killing Haniyeh complicates the negotiations further?
Said, you literally just asked me a
I'm just
version of that
asking you,
question.
is this
Willie, go
likely
ahead.
an event that would
Go
likely-
ahead, Willie.
Very similar
Go ahead,
question
Willie.
to
Said, I understand that you are very passionate about these issues. It is not helpful for you to interrupt your
I'm sorry,
colleagues.
but I'm saying, I'm just making a
I-
point that this particular journalist was
I
actually
understand.
arrested
I
and
understand.
tortured by the Israelis.
I appreciate your flag, but you interrupting your colleagues is not productive to the daily press briefing process. Does Nick have cooties or something? I'm teasing. I don't have anything off the top. Daphne, do you want to kick us off?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So on the attacks in Beirut and Tehran, are you concerned that this complicates the ceasefire talks?
So first, to take a little bit of a step back, we have, of course, seen the news and the statement from Hamas, but I don't have anything additional to offer on that. And I don't want to speculate at this time about this incident or possible reactions. We, of course, continue to be in touch with governments in the region. You all have seen calls from the secretary, readouts of calls that he's had with regional partners. Our priority continues to be to promote diplomatic solutions for a more peaceful, secure, and integrated region, and that, of course, includes continuing to engage and work very hard to close the remaining gaps as it relates to a ceasefire in Gaza. Getting this deal done, bringing the hostages home, getting an influx of humanitarian aid, ending the violence in Gaza, it remains incredibly important, and I'm not going to speculate on any potential impacts. It continues to be a priority for the United States. We know it's a priority for regional partners. We know it's a priority for Israel, and so we'll continue to work at it.
Both Qatar and Egypt, which have acted as mediators in talks, suggested that the killing of the Hamas leader in Tehran could further jeopardize efforts to secure a truce in Gaza. Do you share that concern?
So, as I just said, I'm just not going to speculate on any impacts here.
How can you move the talks forward at this point, given everything that's gone on in the past 24 hours?
We spoke a little bit about this yesterday, Daphne. I'm not going to speak to the specific inner workings of the ongoing negotiation process and the effort that is continuing to be done underway to close these gaps and to get this deal done. It's something that we're going to remain focused on, but I'm not going to get into more specifics beyond that.
And then we reported that the U.S. was seeking to deter Israel from striking Beirut in retaliation for the attack over the weekend. Do you feel Israel has ignored your warnings, and what conversations have you had with Israel today?
So just to reiterate what you heard the secretary say in an interview in Singapore, we were not involved in this mission or operation, and certainly I'm not going to get into specific private diplomatic discussions. What I can say is that our priority region-wide continues to be promoting diplomatic solutions for a more peaceful and secure region. That's what we're going to continue to remain focused on. Those have been at the core tenets of the conversations that the secretary has had in the past half a day in the region, continuing to talk to counterparts about ways we can continue to push and make a ceasefire happen, and that's what we'll keep focus on.
Has he spoken with, or will he speak with Israeli counterparts?
I don't have any calls to preview at this time, Daphne. As you guys have saw, he had the opportunity to speak to his counterparts in Qatar as well as Jordan, and per usual, any other call readouts that we have, we'll make sure to share those with you. Olivia, go ahead.
Thank you, Vedant.
We understand that the Israelis provided a heads up ahead of the Beirut strike. Was a heads up provided to the United States ahead of the targeting of Haniyeh?
So what I can just say, Olivia, is that this is not something that we were involved in, and I'm not going to get into more specific diplomatic conversations beyond that.
Okay. And I know that you're not speculating about the fallout from here, but does the U.S. view this as a step as conducive to finalizing a ceasefire deal?
Again, I think that's asking me to speculate on something in another way. I'm just not going to speculate on this. We are clear-eyed and focused on what the United States' priorities are and what we would like to see happen, and that is continued focus on the diplomacy. Our team is continuing to work very hard to narrow and close the gaps. We continue to believe a deal is possible. Getting a deal done is of vital importance for so many reasons that I've spent much of this week talking about, whether it be bringing hostages home, whether it's getting an influx of humanitarian aid, being able to partake in diplomacy to get this this region out of endless cycles of violence. So for all those reasons and more, this is incredibly important, and we'll remain focused on that.
So without looking ahead, looking backwards, how essential had Haniyeh been in these discussions? I mean, we know that ultimately Yahya Sinwar was signing off on decisions that Hamas was making, but how essential was Haniyeh in the discussions to this point?
So I'm not going to get into the specifics of that kind of those kinds of negotiations in terms of the pertinent actors and interlocutors. What I can say is through appropriate channels, we have been able to continue to communicate with Hamas and Israel, of course, as it relates to the contours of the deal and the negotiations that's on the table, and we continue to have confidence in our ability to do so, and our ability to participate in these talks and work around the clock to get this deal done.
So the Qataris have not signaled that they are no longer going to take part in these talks?
I'm certainly not going to speak for another government. I've said that a couple times this week, but so from the United States perspective, we continue to remain laser focused on this. Qatar has been an irreplaceable partner throughout this whole conflict, dating back to even October 7th and beyond, and that continues to be the case.
Okay, one more, sorry. The Supreme Leader of Iran put out a tweet essentially saying it is our duty to take revenge. What does the United States know about possible retaliatory steps taken by Iran or its press?
So I'm just not going to speculate on what the Supreme Leader may or may not be referring to, and don't want to speculate on the actions that the Iranian regime may or may not take. We are continuing to urge restraint to all parties to avoid an escalation into a wider regional conflict. And as the Secretary said in Singapore, the United States was not involved in the attack in Tehran, but the United States, of course, will take every possible measure to appropriately and accurately protect our personnel, our interests in the region and beyond, should we need to.
What about those of the Israelis? Is there a commitment to come to Israel's defense
So,
for Iran?
You've heard me say this a number of times this week. Our commitment to Israel's security and defending them from malign attacks like those from reckless regimes like the Iranian regime, that is unwavering and ironclad, and that continues to be the case. Israel is, of course, a country that faces a number of threats purely based on just where they are in the world, and so that our security relationship with them is unwavering, our commitment to them is unwavering, but again, I'm not going to speculate on any actions that may or may not happen.
Thank you. I have one more on
Vedant?
Russia.
We'll come back. Yeah. Go ahead, Saeed.
Just to follow up on
Yeah.
Olivier's question. Now, you said, to understand clearly, you're saying that if Iran responds, the U.S. will be there to defend Israel, correct?
What I'm saying is that our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad, and of course, part of that includes the defense of Israel in when it faces threats from malign actors like the Iranian regime. That should be no surprise to you, Saeed.
So you often speak of the rights of every nation to defend itself. Do you acknowledge that this was an Israeli aggression against Iran?
I don't have any information for you, Said, on this incident or possible reactions, and certainly don't have any thing to offer as it relates to attribution, and would let the Israelis speak to any operation of theirs that they may be undertaking. I don't have a perspective to offer
it seems
from.
that the whole world acknowledges that this was an Israeli aggression on the capital of Iran. But suppose, when you develop the proper information to say that Israel was behind this aggression on the Iranian capital, it is within Iran's right to defend itself.
I'm not going to speculate on this, Saeed. I don't have an update or an assessment to offer for you as it relates to attribution, and so I will just leave it at that.
Okay. In principle, as a sovereign nation, does Iran have the right to defend itself?
Saeed,
It's a simple question. Does Iran, as a sovereign nation, as any other nation, does it have the right to defend itself?
Iran is a regime that time and time again, since 1979, has been the largest and greatest exporter of terrorism, not just in the Middle East, but broadly. And it has a clear track record of not just suppressing its own people, but also funding, promoting, encouraging malign, destabilizing actions across the region. And our opinion and point of view on the Iranian regime regime is quite clear, and we will not hesitate to not just stand with our allies and partners when it comes to defending against threats from Iran, but also taking appropriate action from the United States as it stands.
So you're saying that the nature of the Iranian regime strips it of the right to defend itself and to defend its
Said, I
sovereignty.
just don't have any assessment to offer on this.
No, you just said that.
I don't have any assessment to offer on this
correctly.
incident. I don't have any
Okay.
assessment on attribution.
Okay, let me ask you
anything
something.
like
You
that.
talked about the deal that is underway, the negotiations. Now, is there any doubt that the Israeli Prime Minister have taken almost every step to scuttle the negotiations over the past few months?
So
Do you have any doubt in your mind
I'm
that
not
he has
gonna-
taken those?
I'm not going to speak for Prime Minister Netanyahu, Saeed,
Right.
and I will let him
Okay.
speak for himself. But in general, what I can say is that we have seen the Israelis engaged and constructive in conversations that we have been having about a ceasefire deal. And so we continue to believe both that a ceasefire deal is both achievable and urgent, and it is something that our partners in Israel want. I'm not going to speak to the specificity of the ongoing process beyond that.
Okay, but Mr. Haniyeh was the chief negotiator. He was the chief negotiator involved in these negotiations. So when Israel first kills his grandchildren, then kills all his children, then kills him, does that send like a clear message that they don't want these negotiations? He is the chief negotiator, correct?
Said, I will say again, as I've said to Daphne and others, I'm not going to speculate on this as it relates to how it may or may not impact a ceasefire deal. What I can say is that the United States unequivocally is focused on continuing its work to close the gaps. We think that getting a deal done is not just in the United States' interest, it's in the region's interest, it's in Israel's interest, it's in the interest of the Palestinian people. We are talking about creating the conditions so the remaining hostages can return home, that there can be an influx of humanitarian aid, and getting this region out of this endless cycle of violence. So that's what we're going to remain focused on.
Okay.
And as I said to Olivia and others, when it comes to continuing to engage in these conversations, there continue to be ways in which we can continue to engage with Hamas and Israel appropriately as it relates to the contours of the deal. And that work, I have no doubt, will continue.
Okay, let me ask you, a basic question. As far as the negotiations are concerned, is the killing of Mr. Haniyeh good, bad, or indifferent in your view?
I am not going to speculate again for what is probably now the 15th time. I am not going to speculate on.
I'm just saying, how is it likely to impact?
Again, I'm just not going to speculate on that. What I can speak to is what the United States is doing and what the United States is focused on. And what we are doing and what we are focused on is working to close the gaps. We continue to believe a deal is achievable. We think it's urgent, and we continue to work at this around the clock.
Okay, my
I'm
last.
gonna move on,
I
Saeed.
promise that
Okay.
it's my last. My last.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel that killing Haniyeh complicates the negotiations further?
Saeed, you literally just asked me
I'm
a
just
version of
asking
that
you,
question.
Is this
Willie, go
likely
ahead.
an event that is likely
Go ahead,
ask a
Willie.
very similar
Go ahead,
question to
Willie.
Saeed.
It's fine.
I mean, you mentioned that Israel, in your eyes, has shown a willingness or that it is a priority to get a deal done. But, I mean, certainly eliminating the person that you're trying to get a deal done with suggests that it's not a priority.
So, look, Willie, I don't have an assessment to offer as it relates to attribution, and I'm certainly not going to speak for the Israelis or any other government or entity as it relates to this. What I can say is that the United States is squarely focused on is getting a deal done. It is the message that the Secretary is carrying in the conversations that he's having with world leaders and counterparts, some of which that we just talked about, and that's what we are focused on. We continue to believe a deal is achievable and urgent, and we're going to have our team continue to work tirelessly to close those gaps.
Just shifting, in the wake of the Haniyeh killing, is there any posturing or concern of embassies in the region or elsewhere right now, security-wise?
So look, I take this situation, put the situation aside for a second, Willie. We take the safety of all our personnel, not just State Department personnel, but any personnel, American personnel, incredibly seriously. We take the safety of our embassies and our facilities and our installations incredibly seriously, and constantly around the clock, we are always assessing circumstances on the ground. We are assessing what risk levels are, what threat levels are, and appropriately we will make adjustments on those as we need to. We certainly aren't going to read out that operational process from here. That would kind of be counterproductive. But what I can say is that this is not just tantamount of importance to the Secretary of State. I know it is also of importance to not just the President, but the Secretary of Defense and other executives across this interagency who may or may not have personnel abroad. So this is something that we are paying very close attention to. Yeah, go ahead, Daphne.
You said that you've seen Israel engage in constructive conversations about a ceasefire deal. Is it still your assessment today that they're engaging constructively?
That is still our assessment. I'm not going to speak to specific negotiation processes, but that continues to be our assessment. Go ahead.
So, saying nothing about the eventual outcome of the talks or progress towards a ceasefire hostage release deal, can you say if, given the response from key mediators, from Hamas, will the assassination lead to at least a pause in the talks?
So that is not our understanding at the moment, but beyond that, I'm not going to speculate on the impacts here. To say for also probably the 15th time, our focus is on working to close this gap, the gaps that exist, and continuing to work to get this deal done. When we say that this is of vital importance to the region, that is not hyperbole, that we legitimately think that to be true, not just in the context of Israel and Gaza, but also when we were talking about destability across the region. We think that a ceasefire deal has the potential to be beneficial in addressing that situation writ large as well.
Has there been any direct or indirect conversations between the U.S. and Iran following the assassination?
I'm not aware of any diplomatic conversations. Yeah. Go ahead, Alex. Actually, before I come to you, does anybody else have any? Go ahead, Ravi. I know, Alex, I'm sure you have a wide geography to cover, so I just want to close out this region of the world before we come to you. Yeah.
Follow up on the assassination of Haniyeh and implication on the Gaza ceasefire talks. Actually, one of the mediators, Qatar's Foreign Minister Al-Thani, today asked a question, which is that how can mediation succeed when one party assassinates the negotiator on the other side? What is your response to this?
So look, again, I'm not a spokesperson for the Qatari Foreign Ministry. I will let the Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs speak to his own comments. What I can say is that the Secretary and the Prime Minister had a constructive call earlier today where the Secretary reiterated again the need for getting a ceasefire done. The Secretary reiterated the United States commitment to continuing to work to close these gaps and to get a deal across the finish line for all the reasons that I talked about.
One more, please, on the Middle East. Do you have any comment on two Al Jazeera journalists, Ismail and Rami, today in northern Gaza? This raises to the number of journalists and media personnel killed in Gaza to 165. What is your reaction?
So we've seen those reports and are tracking the details. We also have asked our counterparts in the region for additional information should they have it. Look, as the Secretary himself has said, we offer our deep condolences to the many Palestinian journalists in Gaza killed or injured during this war and for all that they are suffered. As I said, we are continuing to engage with the government of Israel and the IDF on the importance of protecting journalists and all civilians during the conflict. We believe that journalists have been integral to shedding a light on the dire circumstances in the Gaza Strip right now. And we have been absolutely clear that Israel has a moral obligation and a strategic imperative to protect civilians. And of course, part of that includes journalists. But I don't have any more as it relates to this specific.
Just a quick follow-up. You said you asked Israel for more information. There have been many incidents over the past 9 months that you asked Israel to provide more information. Can you give us one example of?
I'm not going to get into I'm not going to get into specific diplomatic conversations. There have been a number of instances in which we have asked our partners in Israel for additional information in which they have provided it. They have shed light on the nature of those operations and how they were conducted. we will continue to engage with those conversations privately with our partners in Israel and publicly when needed. Prem, go ahead.
I will have a non-Middle East question later if you can.
I'm sure you will. Prem, go ahead.
Thank you, Vedant.
Said, I understand that you are very passionate about this issue. It is not helpful for you to interrupt your
I'm sorry,
colleagues.
but I'm saying, I'm just making a point that this particular journalist was
I
actually
understand.
arrested
I
and
understand.
tortured by the Israelis.
I appreciate your flag, but you interrupting your colleagues is not productive to the daily press briefing process. Prem,
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Vedant. So perhaps this is a good follow-up here. It's been 184 days now since Israeli forces killed Hinderjob, her family, and medics sent to save her. Last month, when myself and other colleagues asked about the investigation into this, the department said Israel said that they're still investigating, and that Israel also said that the UN and Red Crescent did not respond to outreach from the Israeli government. I reached out to the Red Crescent, and they said that no, the Israeli government did not reach out. So, has the Biden-Harris administration followed up on this alleged lie by the Israeli government, or sought to confirm any of Israel's claims on the half-year-old killing now of this girl and her family?
So we are in touch with our partners in Israel around the clock on a variety of issues. I don't have any specifics to read out as it relates to this conversation. I'm happy to check if there have been any additional updates, but to my understanding, this investigation is still ongoing, and I will leave it to them to speak to the details of it.
So I had reached out to the Israeli government as well, and while I was reaching out to the Red Crescent, they said they would get back to me with an answer, and that they did not after we reported the Red Crescent said that
well, it's really, I'm not a spokesperson for the responsiveness of another foreign ministry.
Given that, this government gives them billions of dollars in aid, I'd imagine that such claims want to be fact-checked.
So we will continue to engage with our partners in Israel. We ask them for additional information. We ask questions when we see incidents unfold, and we'll continue to do that. As it relates to this incident, I'm not aware of any updates, and I believe this investigation is ongoing.
Okay, and one quick one, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. With the 2024 election around the corner, how has the U.S. followed up on the reporting, I believe a month and a half ago, ish, forgive me if I'm wrong, of Israeli government-sponsored influence campaigns attempting to influence American politics?
So I'm not aware of this report specifically.
The New York Times reporting. The New York Times reporting.
Right. Sorry.
Yes.
No, I understand what you're speaking to. So look, any foreign entity is aware of U.S. laws and the confines in which they should or should not be allowed to operate within the United States. When it comes to disinformation and things targeted at the United States, I will say that is not necessarily something that lives in this department, and I'm sure my colleagues at the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security would be happy to talk to you about efforts that are underway as it relates to election integrity and things like that, including the Office of the ODNI.
Are there any other nations who receive billions of dollars from the United States that are alleged to conduct such foreign influence campaigns?
So I'm just not going to speculate on what was a non-government assessment report cited in that reporting, but I am sure that these other entities who deal on this very important issue would be happy to speak to you in greater detail. Go ahead.
So I know you said that you wouldn't comment on the impact of Haniyeh, but the U.S. government had a $5 million reward on the head of Fuad Shakar. I was just wondering if you had any comment on his killing and
So first, we spoke a little bit about this earlier in the week. We've seen some conflicting reports on whether Fuad Shakar survived the strike, but the latest information out of Beirut suggests that he did succumb to his injuries after being taken to a hospital for treatment. Let's also remember that this was an individual who was involved in the 1983 U.S. Marine barracks bombing and certainly has American blood on his hands. And as it relates to our Rewards for Justice program, I just don't have any additional information. Confidentiality is a key aspect of the way in which the department's Reward for Justice program operates, and as a rule, we don't publicly disclose specific information submitted into responses as it relates to things like this. But I think an important thing to note, again, is that the U.S. was not involved in the planning of the attack, and this was an action taken by the IDF based on Israeli intelligence. DR, go ahead.
Thank you. You just said that the U.S. is not involved in this act, but the Iranian government sent a letter to United Nations Security Council, and they clearly says that the U.S. Has the responsibility for that act, which they say that this act could not have occurred without the authorization and intelligence support of the United States. What's your comment on this?
So again, I just don't have any assessment to offer for you as it relates to attribution. And our message to any country, to any entity, whether it be the Iranian regime or otherwise, is the call for de-escalation and to not take any actions that would lead the region into wider conflict. That has been our message since October 7th, and that continues to be the case.
And then yesterday, the U.S.-led global coalition attacked PMF, the Iranian-backed groups in Iraq. So, and then the Iraqi government condemned this, and they said that despite all the efforts through political and diplomatic channels, and that the U.S.-led global coalition, they attacked the PMF, and they want to drag Iraq into the wider conflict in the region. So why did you conduct this attack, and what's your comments on the Iraqi government?
Let's be a little bit clear about what this is that U.S. forces carried out a defensive airstrike in Iraq on July 30th. These actions were taken to address an imminent threat posed to U.S. and coalition forces, and we have a commitment to the safety and security of our personnel, and we won't hesitate to defend our people or hold responsible those who may potentially harm U.S. personnel, and it's as simple as that. Go ahead in the back.
Well, thank you. Always in the same Middle East issues. I want to bring you back to Al Jazeera, please. Al Jazeera, the network now assures you, confirms that it was a targeted killing. The crew of reporters were reporting by the house of Haniyeh, and they've been struck by that missile. What would you have to say? We know you're talking to the Israelis, but what are you specifically asking them? You have 22 Arab countries who need an answer.
So I don't have any updates as it relates to this particular circumstance. As I said to your colleague, we are aware of these reports, and we have communicated with our partners in Israel for more additional information, but I don't have anything to share beyond that at the moment.